Gary, why don't you read the first portion, Luke 15, 11 to 22. And then Dee, if you would read 25 to the end of the chapter, 25 to 32.
Okay, I'll be reading from the Message. Then he said, there was once a man who had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, Father, I want right now what is coming to me. So the father divided the property between them. It wasn't long before the younger son packed his bags and left for a distant country. There, undisciplined and dissipated, he wasted everything he had. After he had gone through all his money, there was a bad famine all through that country, and he began to hurt. He signed on with a citizen there who assigned him to his field to slop the pigs. He was so hungry that he would have eaten the corn cobs and the pig slop, but no one would give him any. That brought him to his senses. He said, all those farmhands working for my father set down to 3 meals a day, and here I am starving to death. I'm going back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son. Take me on as a hired hand. He got up and went home to his father. When he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. His heart pounded. He ran out, embraced, and kissed him. The son started his speech. Father, I have sinned against God. I have sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again. You want me to read 22 as well? But the father wasn't listening. He was calling to his servants, quick, bring a clean set of clothes and dress him.
Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard dance music coming from the house, and he asked one of the servants what was going on. Your brother is back, he was told, and your father has killed the calf where we were fattening and has prepared a great feast to celebrate his coming home again unharmed. The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, all these years I've worked hard for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to do. And in all that time, you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet when this son of yours comes back after spending your money on prostitutes and you celebrate by killing the finest calf we have on the place. Look, dear son, his father said to him, you and I are very close, and everything I have is yours. But it is right to celebrate, for he is your brother, and he was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is now found.
We had to celebrate. Chapter Luke 15 begins with religious leaders, opponents of Jesus, asking him, why do you welcome sinners and eat with them? Why do you do this? Maybe this question to Jesus, why do you eat with sinners and welcome them, is kind of like the story of Old Turtle that we heard in children's time today. Jesus is putting the broken truth back together. And he knew that in order for the broken truth to be put back together, he would have to teach us how to look at people who are different from ourselves and see the image of God. That we would have to learn to look at someone different and speak the truth and see the truth in love and with love. Love for ourselves that's big enough to love the other. This week I've been preoccupied with praying that people will tell the truth. Just simply tell the truth and face the truth. Jesus speaks the truth when leaders who don't get him accuse him of being maybe soft on crime or weak on tradition or something. throwing the doors open to outsiders who don't deserve to be at the table. So why do you do it? They ask him. Why do you eat with low-life sinners and welcome them? And Jesus answers, it seems like he's trying to answer by creating a whole truth. That is this tiny, small truth that rolls away the big, angry untruth. The parable of the lost son and the lost sheep and the lost coin that are right there in chapter 15 as well. They're parables about telling the truth, that no one is lost forever, and that God never stops coming to find us. Older brother can grumble and judge all he wants. He can refuse to listen to any story that messes with his neat, clean package. But you know what? Loving parents will always celebrate when the troubled kid comes home. And the younger brother, he can manipulate and whine all he wants. He's good at it. He knows how to push all the right buttons. But he can't take back the hurt that he caused. He can't walk in and get back the experience and the respect and the day-to-day doing the right thing that he's lost. This is all part of the truth. And the other part of the truth is that both are loved, and they won't be quite whole until they can hear each other's stories and look at each other's faces and understand that they are both children of a loving parent. I think what I hear in this story, as I struggle with the story of our current national situation, is overlapping stories that refuse to meet each other, overlapping truths that refuse to meet, and some lies that refuse to let go. I've had trouble focusing on this familiar story of the prodigal son. I've been preoccupied with the words of our opening prayer from last week that Debbie mentioned in the call to worship. Yahweh, you keep faith forever. You secure justice for the oppressed. You give food to the hungry. You set captives free. You give sight to the blind. You raise up those who were bowed down. You love those who do justice. You protect strangers. You sustain orphans and those who are grieving. But you frustrate the way of the corrupt. I so want God to frustrate the way of the corrupt. This familiar story about the sweet old dad wasn't holding my interest. But the prodigal son is a story about truth, and it's tucked into this Gospel of Luke that demands truth over and over again from the mouth of Jesus. It's these tiny, gentle, merciful truths that frustrate the way of the corrupt. It may even do a number on the corruption in me that needs to celebrate when the younger brother comes home, even though he's full of it, or the corruption in me that needs to respect the older brother and to see that his story matters too. One of the ways I got around my distraction about this parable was to look at the whole section of this gospel from chapter 10 all the way to chapter 15, and seeing how Jesus just relentlessly harps on these tiny, gentle truths, making whole the fragments of truth that angry and scared and hurting people are threatening to throw in his face throughout the gospel. And we still use fragments of truth as weapons when we're pissed or petrified or just experiencing deep, unfocused pain. Jesus gets it, and he cares. But he won't let half-truth or hypocritical truth or rancid and ruined truth just stand unchallenged. In Luke 12, 2 and 3, Jesus says that everything that is hidden in the dark will be uncovered in the light. Things that are whispered will be shouted. The truth will be shouted out from the rooftops. Say something true or don't say anything at all, Jesus seems to be saying over and over again, not just to his opponents, not just to religious leaders, but to his disciples, over and over again. In Luke 10, Jesus sends his friends out with this tiny and somewhat risky truth. He says, I'm sending you out like lambs among wolves. When Matthew tells the story, he adds that Jesus said they should be shrewd like snakes and gentle and innocent like doves. This is the tiny, powerful, whole truth. Jesus talks about truth in relationships in Luke chapter 10, in the parable of the Samaritan. They ask him, who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor really? And Jesus goes right for the heart. The people you hate, the people you're suspicious of, the liars and cheats, the Samaritans, Jesus says to his friends, did you know, he tells a story about it, did you know they have a deep capacity for compassion and love and humanity just like you do? The truth is, that's your neighbor. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus also talks about truth in prayer. His disciples ask him, tell us how to pray. And he says, say, your will be done. Your kingdom come. Forgive us our debts. Let us forgive those who are in debt to us. Don't pray just to put on a show. Don't hold up your prayer book so others will praise you. Jesus talks about truth in desire in Luke chapter 12. Guard against greed. Your life is not the sum of your possessions. Tell the truth about your treasure. Tiny, gentle truth. And the truth there is people are more important than property. All through this gospel, including the parables of the lost sheep and the lost coin and the lost children, this gospel is about truth. Jesus talks about truth in facing reality. At the end of chapter 12, he says division and conflict are real. And when you listen to and embrace and speak my truth and God's truth, you're going to be in conflict. You're going to be experiencing division. But the solution is to find a way to let the overlapping stories meet, not to let untruth stand, but to let the stories hear each other. Maybe the solution from Jesus is a prayer for prodigals, wrapped in this small truth, in these teachings of Jesus and in all the gospel of Jesus Christ. The truth is in the small things, the mustard seed in Luke 13, the bit of yeast, the narrow door, kindness, compassion, healing, honesty. Jesus talks about truth in our motivation, not seeking power just for your team or for yourself. Jesus is constantly railing against posers. He's preaching about integrity. Don't just show up in time to get the photo op with the most important person in the room, seeking the place of honor or advantage. Look out, Jesus says. Sooner or later, the last will be first. You can see Luke chapter 12 for all of this. Jesus knows our temptation to seek wealth and control and security. He warns against seeking a false narrative, against ignoring the painful fact of reality, keeping the unpleasant and the uncomfortable out, avoiding those who only hurt our advantage. But Jesus says, don't just invite your rich neighbors and friends who might have a favor for you in return. Invite the poor, those who really need your hospitality, even if they're unpleasant, and offer no advantage to you. These tiny, gentle truths are no joke. No wonder the old turtle had to wait a long time for a little girl to come along, strong enough to carry them. The parable of the prodigal is a prayer for the prodigal in all of us, as Jesus prays over us the truths of compassion and love, God's motivation, God's truth, love that makes a way possible, love that opens up the way and makes it possible for any liar to tell the truth. Love that makes a way of escape, as the Apostle Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians, a way of escape from any manipulation or falsehood or sin. Anyone who is tempted or broken, the mercy of God can frustrate the way of the corrupt, that we might be stuck in the space of truth just long enough to come to our senses, like the prodigal. Most people who write about the prodigal son aren't so sure how sorry or contrite or guilty he was feeling about taking his father's money. He was feeling hungry. He was feeling the truth of hunger. And so he went back to his loving parent who was waiting for him, waiting for that moment to return to the love that is our beginning and our end for all of us prodigals, and the duty-bound older kids too, and the parents and the pig farmers and the friends who just showed up for the open bar. Amy Jill Levine, in an article called What the Prodigal Son Doesn't Mean in the Christian Century, tells a story from rabbinic literature. Hasikta Rabbatai recounts, a king had a son who had gone astray from his father on a journey of 100 days. His friend said to him, "Return to your father." He said, "I can't." He was ashamed. Then his father sent word, "Return just as far as you can, and I will come the rest of the way to you." So God says, "Return to me, and I will return to you." For the rabbis, Levine says, the challenge is not seeing God's love in a new way. The challenge, an inevitable challenge in every religious system, is to get the wayward to return. And so we pray for ourselves and others. May God frustrate the way of the corrupt. This is a prayer for all prodigals. That lies told will become like dust on the wind, with God's breath blowing them away. That the familiar path of fear and division will become dark and slippery. See Psalm 35 for that one. And that we may all learn from Jesus that the path to truth is always firm, and the house of love has many, many rooms and a place at the table for us all. Sometimes this truth is hard to take because I can't see it all, only fragments. I can't see it all until I see it from the place where you stand, or more likely where someone else who I don't really get stands. The prodigal and his brother, maybe they needed to stay up all night after the party was over and just listen to each other for a long time and understand how the truth was broken, and that the way is frustrating and long, as long as they cling to lies about themselves and each other. The truth of love is that Jesus welcomes us sinners and eats with us, and he does it so that we learn to welcome the prodigal in ourselves and in each other. And may it be so. Amen.